And Ezra, we see the president concerned with nothing but the economics of this, but I don't see any comprehension on the part of the president or really many other people in Washington about what these economics are. I mean, I started referring to this as comparable to 1929 weeks ago when people were still referring to, the recession of 2008 or the stock market drop of 1987. I thought this looked like the great crash of 1929 and the possible Great Depression of the 1930s then. I don't think Washington understands that you cannot create stimulus for an economy that isn't functioning at all.
I agree with you. And in some ways, it's going to be harder even than the Great Depression. This is, as some economists have said to me, it's what happens if you mix a recession, a financial crisis, a natural disaster, and a war. Right? We don't just have a shortfall in demand. We don't just have a shortfall in people buying things. We also have an economy that we are stopping. We are telling people they cannot supply their goods. They cannot supply their labor. They cannot go to a restaurant. You send me a check right now, I still can't go to a restaurant and use it. I'm in shelter in place. And so the big picture here is we're facing an unbelievable economic crisis. But I want to say something really important about this. I am not against the idea that you have to take the cost of economic suffering and that at some point that does have a trade-off in life. We deal with that all the time in American politics. It is a harsh reality of simply being alive in any economy. But it is not a choice between letting the economy go as normal and letting a virus rip through the country. If bodies are piling up, as Bill Gates said, if you cannot, by the way, as a young person, get into a hospital to deliver a child, to get a pneumonia checked out, to get a surgery done, to go to the dentist, if your coworkers are not coming into work, if your parents are dying, the economy is not going to go on as normal. I was talking to economists all day about this. I was talking to Jason Furman, who was one of Obama's chief economists, and others. And the thing that the economists keep saying to me is, we're not the ones saying this. I don't know what form of economic logic is coming here, but the economists will not tell you that allowing a pandemic to kill 1.7 million Americans, sicken countless more, and completely bring the country to a standstill is going to allow the economy to function normally. This is a false choice of enormous, enormous consequence that is being set up by the president and some of his allies.